There we go. So just while everybody's coming in the room, oh God, people are ready waiting, which is ideal, but that's great. Oh, it's great to have you as well, Lorna. Just for some quick introductions, I know we've got quite a lot of sort of regular DevHub attendees who probably know my face. So I'm Lucy, the DevHub community manager for anybody who's sort of joining in at the moment. And with me as well, I also have Sophie. So to be totally honest, it's actually Sophie's first week working here. So thrown her in the deep end a little bit and brought her along to our first DevHub North of 2022. So it's Sophie's very first DevHub North. So I think we're all really excited. Have you been looking forward to it, Lorna?
Yes, it's come along very, very fast.
I know.
Definitely.
It doesn't seem like 2 minutes ago that we were sort of on the phone talking about different topics and ideas.
Yes. Yeah, it's gone crazy. And like, I can't believe how fast even like 2022 has gone. Almost March and
mad, isn't it? I'm looking forward to Pancake Day on Tuesday. We're going to make pancakes in the office.
Oh, that's exciting.
I know. I'm bringing in Nutella and sugar and whatever else. So we're going to...
That sounds very nice.
I know. But yeah, so I can see everybody already posting in the chat already, which is ideal. So some of our regular DevHub attendees, you know the score. Hey, Andrew, Nathan, Alexandra. So glad you got in. So yeah, thank you all for coming along. So as you've all already discovered, we've got the chat for sort of feel free to put in any questions sort of throughout for Lorna as well. We also have our Q&A bot. So please do keep them active. Feel free to ask questions that Lorna can answer at the end. As well as that, I'll be putting on a few little polls as well. So please do get your votes in. And yeah, I'll let Lorna take it away.
Cool. Okay, I shall share my screen. Disabled screen sharing.
That'll be my fault.
That's
Sorry.
quite all right. That's all right.
You think I'd be more prepared? There you go. Should work.
And I suppose it's the number one question of a few years now. Can you see my screen okay?
All good, yeah.
Cool. Okay then. So, hi everyone. My name's Lorna. Thank you for making yourself available this evening for my talk on top tips to becoming a better developer. I'll be talking for around 30-35 minutes. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or basically anything, pop it in the, I think it's the Q&A window, bottom part of the screen, the Zoom, or just the chat window, it's fine. So, jumping straight in, to start off with a question, and how would you define a good developer? What sort of like core values or attributes do you think they would sort of have? With this sort of question, I believe it boils down really to an active mindset. I think it can be quite a generic answer, that I suppose, an active mindset. And I'll talk more about why I think that is the case. Hello. So I am a software engineer for a company called Smoothwell, who provides safeguarding solutions for schools. And as well as that, I'm a crisis volunteer for Shout, who are a free 24/7 mental health tech service. In terms of volunteering as well, as a side note, I do like to just throw myself into anything. So for example, last year I did a fellowship where I taught girls data and SQL for 2 months. And then my first virtual talk was last year, and that was to 200 year 10 students, like about my career journey, which was really interesting. So anyhow, I studied software development in college, for 2 years, and then went on to computing at Huddersfield Uni. That was for 4 years, as it included a placement as a software developer. So it was really kind of good to get that year to know that to work out, I guess, that this is what I really want to do with my life, like a bit of real life experience. And then I graduated in 2015 and have since been in dev roles, which feels like a lifetime ago now. Throwback Thursday, standard. So I used to be like painfully shy, very, very shy at school. And every parents' evening, it was always the same. She needs to put her hand up constantly, and me being like quiet as a mouse, just at the back of the room, all that sort of stuff. And it was only until college, really, when I actually came out of my shell. And I don't think there's really a particular reason as to that. I just randomly came out of my shell, I suppose, probably gradually, like over time. And in the past, I have, within a few roles, I have felt heavily stagnated, and for a time have been constantly sidelined. I used to spend a lot of my extra time, my free time, working on work projects. Like, didn't really spend any of that free time on myself. It was always kind of for work. I guess it was, to me, perhaps some sort of like validation for myself, and to prove that I was of value, that I am worthy to be there, really. So with this sort of bad pattern, I suppose, it really became a bad habit, and it was difficult to get out of that mentality of just work, basically. And it took me a good while to realize that I really should just be investing in myself. And basically, yeah, so I'm very keen in like self-investment, and currently now like always keen in improving myself, and in terms of like processes and things like that, always looking to improve things. In particular, in the past, I was in a situation at a previous role where I was a mid dev and just got promoted to a mid. However, I didn't get that pay rise. And at the same time as this, I spotted an online job ad for a junior to be on the same team I was on, and they would be getting more money than I was. Furthermore, it took a whole year to get that pay rise. When I got it, it wasn't really the market value, I suppose, at the time either. So this whole situation really became the kick up the bum, so to speak, for me to do something. To like, I realized I needed to make a change. I needed to change my mindset, I suppose, as well. Do things more for me rather than just for work. So with this, I started working in my spare time on specifically Angular and .NET Core, those two technologies specifically, because at that time in the role, they were using that technology, but I wasn't given the opportunity to. So I thought, I'll do that outside of work and then try to learn those skills. So more about side projects and a cheeky gif. I like working on side projects. I'd say I'm quite active with them. I like that you are able to pick up new skills outside of work, and then there's potentially that space to then bring those skills into work as well. So the first bullet point is a project called Interview Tracker for Devs. And so with this, after I was made redundant, I think it was 2020, or whenever the start of lockdown was, it was like 6 months after that. I think it was 2019 then. I was made redundant, and I found it difficult to keep track of interviews specifically. And with developer ones, usually there's always like a multi-stage. And then I find that you usually also have a tech test usually. So I developed essentially a glorified table that contained mainly information about a job title, a column for tech test. So that could be a link to a PDF document or just a link, just URL. And then also a point of contact. Is this particular job through a internal recruiter, an external recruiter, or is this going direct? And then like key information about them, their name, their email. The main focus point of this project was to track the stages of the interview. So then you could have a column, let's say, to find out what stage I'm at. So am I at the first stage waiting to hear back about the second stage? Or am I waiting for a job offer? Have I rejected a job offer? Am I waiting on the first one to hear about a second one, so on and so on. So generally just the kind of status of where you are at the moment. What I think is also important is having that feedback for your future self. So you may go through an interview process and you may see some red flags, which may make you think, oh, I don't want to go near them again. So it's having that written down just to kind of stay away, and you can put kind of reasoning behind it. But in generally, it's more for comparative reasons, comparing the salary, comparing the perks, the actual company in terms of location, are they remote? And that sort of comparative data is very interesting. The test results parser is a side project I developed in a previous role to help QA out, where if you imagine a drop down and you've got a list of projects in there, you select a project, then you've got another drop down, and in that you get the last 10 releases. And then finally, you get the last drop down where you then get the list of artifacts, which are zip folders. And then upon selecting one of those, you then be able to extract the NUnit automation test results from XML into an Excel spreadsheet in a very specific format that was useful for QA at the time. So I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think it was a couple of worksheets where the first one may have been a bit of an overview of the overall results, and then the second about test cases and test runs, and then there was one more, test something. That was a very interesting project, and this process of actually kind of generating that Excel file, it was done originally very manually, and that was done once a month, and it took several days to do this process. So going from what took several days to then taking a few seconds, it really is worth that extra effort, obviously to a point, probably as with anything anyway. And then the release log checker, a small project. Well, yeah, it is what it is on tin. Essentially it was a small console project that looped through each a specified directory, looping through each file. I think it was over 2,000 files, searching for the word error. If it was an error, then you'd output the file name. Because in the past before that, for deploying this specific project on release night, it would be a manual process of downloading this zip folder, extracting that zip folder, opening up Node++, and then opening all those over 2,000 files into Notepad++, and then doing a search all for the word error. And that would 90% of the time just crash a laptop, which is very annoying. So that kind of simple, really quick project just saved a lot of time and hassle and heartache, really. The DevOps analysis tool I'll be touching more upon a bit later on in this talk in a bit more detail. So, a short story time. About 2 months ago, I went to London for the first time to listen to a talk about female entrepreneurs, how they got their startup business, like how they started it, the ins and outs of it, what it was really like. And it was late evening. I think it was about 10:30 at night. And I was waiting for a taxi. The taxi was around the corner, and then I was on my own at this point as well. The taxi was around the corner, and then my phone just got stolen out of my hands. And it's so typical, isn't it? Because the taxi was just around the corner. It was a cyclist just sped past really, really fast and just took my phone. I was like, oh my God. Luckily, I wasn't hurt. It happened really, really fast. But luckily, a stranger let me use their phone, then called the police, and they dropped me off at the hotel. And safe to say, that night I did not get any sleep. And I had a really early train back to Leeds. I think it took just over 2 hours. And it was a really quiet carriage. And there was like nothing to do, absolutely nothing, no phone. So what do? I think on the way down, I was watching Netflix. I can't remember what I was watching. And all I could think about really in that like just over 2 hour journey was one, how traumatizing I was. Like it was such a traumatizing experience. Nothing like that had ever happened before to me. But then also, given someone is also in that unfortunate situation, how could I make that trauma kind of easier? How could I ease that process of it's such a long process, isn't there, when like your phone is stolen or lost? You need to let your phone provider know, if you got your bank card on it, cancel your cards, all these various steps. So I was trying to think about how could I possibly help people in that unfortunate situation of when or if that happens. More specifically about how to let people you care about most aware that your phone has been stolen or lost. So I started to create this simple side project, and it has a Angular front end and then Node.js back end. And I have just a button for now at the front, which says trigger alert. And then when the user presses that, then an email or multiple emails are sent out. So a user would have to be pre-registered and let's say have a maximum of 5 contact details they can add. So name, email, phone number. And then what I find probably quite biased, what I find quite interesting is that you can also add a bit of detail on things this user can do if they are able to. So, for example, I know that my sister, because when I was on the phone to her, I know that she'd be able to enable lock mode on the iCloud. I know she'd be able to phone O2, let them know that it's been stolen. Whereas maybe I'm not sure my mum would know the details to do something like that. How would she go about it? Where passwords are stored and all that sort of stuff. So it'd be kind of 2 different use cases there. So then perhaps with this, then be an email sent out to my sister. It'll say that Lorna's had her phone stolen, blah, 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 blah. And then it would say things you can do if you are able to. And they'll be listed. Can you please phone O2, make them aware? And then on my mum's email, it might just be a thing of Lorna's phone has been stolen, blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of it. So quite an interesting one. With this particular project, I have thought about taking it further in terms of marketing it and user research and so on. Still might, but I thought it'd be a good story to share in terms of my thought process and mindset in a way. collaborative working. So I think probably most devs have heard of the phrase throwing over the fence, and that is typically not good. It isn't good. And I think to the point, throwing work over the fence, so that's typically from a dev to QA and back and forth, it's to a point, it is a lack of respect, I would say. And shift left is an approach where it's about bringing the dev and test together early, where the devs are able to concentrate on quality at the early stage rather than waiting for errors and bugs, and then having that battle of back and forth, but essentially just making sure that the QA is aware of what the dev is doing and the status of that bug, for example, just working collaboratively together. And yeah, in a nutshell, not to pass work back and forth. It's not productive. Also touching upon devs doing their own tests, arguably a quite taboo topic, I find, because this is more specifically with unit tests, really, but usually I found it's a project has no tests, or if the tests don't work, just comment it out. And then you've got tests that are just completely ignored in the pipelines. And then you've got failed tests locally that don't ever get fixed. They're just left, not even uncommented, just left. And then also where you have interviews for roles and such, and typically asked about, do you have experience in unit testing? And then you say your experience, but then it's always a thing of they don't actually implement unit tests themselves. So these are, I'd say, quite common things I've come across to do with unit tests. Benefits to dev testing include true documentation of how a system works. More specifically with complex systems, they'll be easier to understand. And then if you have, for example, a new starter, they could perhaps feel more confident coming into this code base, and a protection from bad changes. So if you have like a task, you do changes, always ensure that the tests, you add your tests or update a test, and then ensure that all the tests are passing, and then push your code. Communities and networking. So something else I wanted to touch upon, and my favorite social media is LinkedIn. I think it's fantastic. But also, just a question, well, a rhetorical question. Since when do people put in their headline things like X Amazon, X Google, and X Meta? Anyhow, I've noticed that's been a bit of a recent occurrence, and I just keep seeing it everywhere. In terms of community specifically, I do try to be active with them, but this is not a strong point of mine. I tend to join communities and I just don't do anything with them, really. There's like a few Slack channels I'm a part of, like this Tech London, which I just have a flick through, really, different channels on there, but I don't really do anything. So that's yeah, something to work on, definitely. And then also, they really cleverly named the .network. Absolutely love that name, and that's by Gravitas Recruitment, and that is a great space for devs to meet up, basically, and have a game of crazy golf and drinks. I think the previous and first event was about 2 weeks ago, and there's another one, I think it's the end of April. That was really cool. I think it was my first like in-person dev meetup that I've had, so that was really fun. Notion. Now, I like Notion, and to me it's like really pretty notes, basically. I used to use Sublime a lot. I still use it, to be fair, but the Notion side of things, like the headers and things like that, the kind of markup text, I like much better. So I use this to centralize my common notes. So these are things that I look at every day. And specifically with the stand-up document, I find useful because I can be forgetful. I've always kind of done where just before stand-up, I'll sit down and I'll think, what did I do yesterday? And then what am I doing today? Have I got any blockers? I'll kind of sit there just before I do it. And then I'll usually, I might forget some bits, but then it's nice to have that stand-up document just to try and keep it up to date. And it's all these things I look at every day or most days are just all in one location. And to me, arguably, again, I think the most important one is the hashtag brag bag, where you can list all your small and big accomplishments, things you're proud of, any feedback really. And I think that's been really useful. A statement. So, an unhealthy engineering team leads to infrequent product releases, mass defects, and low customer satisfaction rates. DevOps analysis tool. So this was the side project I said I'd touch upon. And this is a side project, well, two side projects, I suppose, and all to do with data. I love data. And then also the aspect of data and spreadsheets, like any excuse to create a cheeky spreadsheet. So in 2019, I created this DevOps analysis tool project in my spare time. And this was essentially focused on getting basic stats out of DevOps as your DevOps. So think about build and release, like line graphs, and then you got date dumps as well. This was using Angular 9 and .NET Core. Fast forward a year and then into another role, I created a side project from scratch, and this was in Angular 11 and Node.js. And this provided more detail. I progressed more with this one. This provided stats on Octopus Deploy, Team Sitting, Jira, and then something I'm going to touch upon in the next slide is Dorametrics. So this second one had more focus on streamlining existing processes, simplifying common stats, and then highlighting potential issues and inconsistencies too, and hopefully finding them quicker. So this second side project, I actually showed my old manager it at a very early stage of dev, said what I kind of thought the potential could have, and then that became plans to be a new internal tool. It was at this point I was introduced to something called Dorametrics. So Dorametrics, I'm not an expert or anything in this. It's something I find very interesting, and I'm wanting to learn much more about it. So Dorametrics is basically an industry standard hand-measured software delivery in a nutshell after 7 years of research and data from more than 32,000 professionals. They release a PDF, which is the Accelerate State of DevOps 2021. They release this PDF every year, obviously updated each year. And I think this one is 45 pages long. I'm not going to pretend I've read that because I haven't, but scanning through, it looks very interesting. There are 4 key metrics, and these are deployment frequency, lead time for change, time to restore service, and change failure rate. Depending on where you'd look as well, for the last 3 metrics, it might be named slightly different. So this table provides an overview about how these 4 key metrics are measured. We've got the best, the top, the elite level here, where, for example, deployment frequency is best. They're an elite team if they are able to deploy on demand with multiple deploys a day. And then you've got low, medium, and high. So deployment frequency is how often an organization releases to production successfully. It's the easiest metric to calculate. You get a list of deployments by environment, typically live, because probably don't care about staging or dev or QA. And then you group by date. And then through that, you can then calculate the throughput, which is, I guess, the speed. And then just touching upon the other ones, lead time for change is the amount of time it takes a commit to get into production. So you might get a task, for example, in Jira, might get that date it was created, the time it was created, and compare it to when it was actually released. So it'd be quite interesting to see that distance. How long does it actually take? Time to restore service is how long it takes an organization to recover from a failure in production. And then finally, change failure rate is a percentage of deployments causing a failure in production. So I'm just going to do a very brief demo. And then after that, it'll just be the summary screen and then the Q&A part. So if I just modify my screen like so, just trying to find the window. So I have this project. This is a Dorametrics project. This is on GitHub, but I have not updated it, not pushed latest changes. So this is in Node.js, and the main purpose of this project is to calculate Dorametrics. So I have a data JSON file, which is just mock data. I then have, expand that a little bit. I then have a deployment frequency controller. And this is using the mock JSON server, which gets deployments here. And essentially it filters it into a very specific format. And this specific format is because the package I use for generating the charts is in Angular. It's called NGX charts. So I'll show you the format of that data in a moment. And then in the index, just very basic stuff. And then we've got a metric root. So in the future, I'm thinking probably have 3 more controllers for each of the key metrics. And then in this root file, then add those roots in there. So at the moment, if I run command window, just find that. Windows are everywhere. So if I run that Node.js project up, and I also run the JSON server for the mock data, and then I'll bring it over the other screen. So this is just to the backend API deployment frequency here. So this does look quite ugly. So if I copy, and then I just drag across this JSON formatter, this just prettifies it really. So just an overview here. Essentially 3 sections. We've got a by day, by month, by year. So for example, by looking at the average, you can see that the average amount of deployments is just over 2. So expanding on that, we can see that 3rd of September 2020, there was 4, and then the next day there was 1. And the final screen I want to share is in Stack Blitz. So I use this just for simplicity, really. So this is the package I like to use. So this is NGX charts, which is free. In this data type script file here, I've copied the data in here and just split it. So we've got day, month, year. And then in the app component here, we've got the axes set and just the charts are set up here. So looking at this sort of information like this, you might kind of potentially think this day has got a lot more deployments than this day. It's that kind of comparative analysis, I suppose. It's quite interesting, like why, looking at the month view, why would April 2021 have such a high amount of deployments compared to perhaps the previous year? Things like that, really. So I'll just come back to the presentation. To summarize, my tips on becoming a better developer. This slide's focus is very much based on my experience. I've tried not to make the list generic, like have generic attributes. I think a lot of this pertains to having an active mindset, in my opinion. And I think a better dev should be curious, should have a positive can-do attitude, and then being open-minded, but then also being able to accept and take that critical feedback. Being adaptable is important, and then passionate and actually enjoy challenge. And side projects is a biggie. But I feel like side projects are always one of those things where you can pick up a side project, you get really excited about it for a while, you keep working on it, and all of a sudden something else distracts you, or you're too busy or something like that, and you drop it. And then after a while, whatever, a few weeks or something, you pick up another one and then you drop it. I think that's really common. Well, I think it's common anyway. It's like a kind of side project graveyard sort of thing where they all just get dropped. So that, very guilty of that, to be honest. I also think the brag bag document is very useful. As mentioned before, just remembering your accomplishments, no matter how small, even to reflect on like annual reviews with your manager, and just for yourself, really. Mentorship. I've had a mentor for just over a year, and she has been incredibly supportive and encouraging. And with that, I was a mentor for a little bit last year, but then I wasn't able to dedicate enough time, really, to be honest with that. It's something I like to pick up again. Devs should test their own code. That would be quite an interesting one to see people's opinions on. It'd be quite interesting to see, do people think this is true? Or is it one of those things where it's quite, I expect quite to be where it's like, I suspect some people might be like, well, isn't it QA's job to do the testing, which to a point, but I think those sort of tests. Anyway, being able to collaboratively work, so more so in the shift left approach, not throwing over the fence back and forth. And then in terms of blogging, I found that really useful too. I tend to write posts, or try to write posts, where I found usually like a really weird issue or something I found really interesting, and I'll write up a blog post. And then it's something for you to reflect on and look back on, but then also you might actually end up helping someone out, which would be a big plus. And then finally, a portfolio site. I don't think this is strictly essential, but I think it really helped me. It's a place for you to showcase yourself, your achievements, your blog posts and side projects. So my previous portfolio site was in Angular, and I had may seem a bit overkill, but I don't think it is really. I had a backend project for it as well. This is in Node.js, and the purpose of that project was essentially to have the dev.to blog website API, and you've got the GitHub API, pull the blog posts and pull the projects down, the repos down, and then essentially display in the front end. But then I've wanted to essentially unify or streamline all these sites. And I didn't really want to have to keep like blogging on this dev.to site. I wanted to have it on my own portfolio site and not get rid of it, but like just leave it. So that's why I've shifted over to Wix recently. And it's really just for ease, to be honest. Of course, with becoming a better developer or being a good developer, that sort of definition, I think is probably a lot more bullet points, perhaps, or maybe there could be a reduced amount of bullet points. It's quite interesting. And then if anyone's wanting a copy of these slides, if you find it interesting or anything like that, please let me know. I'm always open for a friendly chat, so feel free to get in touch, LinkedIn or whatever. The quote, "Stay curious," comes from the Manager's Path book, which I was recommended from a mentor. And I'm not going to pretend and say I've read it all, because I haven't yet. Read a few pages in, I think about 6 pages. Getting there though. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, Q&A.
Yeah, Lorna, I think we have a bit of a mixture of questions sort of in the chat, as well as sort of the Q&A. I think there's been quite a lot going on in the chat as well.
Okay.
We can have a look on both, basically. I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Oh, okay. There's a good question with in the QA. It's a question about what is your process when thinking of building a side project? I always get stuck when brainstorming. Always end up in analysis paralysis. I like that, analysis paralysis. That's really cool. And assume I have to make a groundbreaking app. I think probably a good point to start is to think of things that you would find useful. So, for example, my brother has epilepsy, and my mum has this like epilepsy diary sort of app thing on her phone, where she was able to keep track of seizures and things. And then it basically broke one day. So I was like, okay, I'll try to develop that for her. Try to develop like a really simple website. So I think probably a good start base is things that could like help your life, like simplify things for you. You can always start off basic. Maybe even like the thing with like an interview tracker, keeping track of jobs and things like that. I'd start off basic, definitely. And having a read. There's a question from Sophie. Hi, what is the best way for a developer to find a mentor? So I found mine, and I've recommended the site before to other people. A site called Meet a Mentor. It is free, and it's like, say Match.com. That sounds a bit older. It's like a Match.com thing for mentors. So you register, and I think you basically it's like dating. You put what you're looking for, and then if you want to be a mentor, mentee, and then they essentially match people, and they will send you like a list of 3 people that may be a good match. What's quite interesting is that they don't actually say the name. They don't actually provide like details about their name. So it's very like a non-biased approach, which is really cool. A question from Josh. Hello. Did you choose Angular on a personal or professional level? I guess Angular started on a professional level because that's what at the time where it was the role at the time they did Angular. I think that's probably why I chose Angular, and then just started doing it in my own time, and then enjoyed it a lot. I still enjoy it now. It's definitely, I think it's become like my go-to technology for front end. A question from George. Do you have any standard learning routine? What works best for you when you have to work on new technology, start with tutorials, or immediately working on code base? It's difficult. I don't think I'm probably not very consistent with this. I think it's probably more of a look at a basic tutorial to see how the underlying stuff works, and then perhaps following like a very basic tutorial and then trying it out. I mean, it probably won't work first time, but then you keep kind of trying it. I think I learn best by kind of looking. Is it looking and then actually doing, rather than just kind of watching?
If I know the question's okay.
There's a lot.
Everyone's bombarding now.
I love it with it. Yeah, I didn't expect so many. That's amazing. That I'm having a flick through. In terms of from Matthew and the testing methodology that you use, does this come with like the dev perspective of adding tests? If so, have you only used really the NUnit package for .NET Core? With unit testing, I probably have very basic knowledge, but it's definitely something I want to definitely improve on. Other ones. Sophie at the start. What is the best way to get involved in tech communities? What would be the best advice to attend your first meetup? I think getting involved with tech communities is something I need to work on too. I think probably Meetup. I think it's called Meetup or Meetups. Probably Meetup, the app. That's quite cool. I think there's quite a lot of like tech events generally and a lot of online ones. I don't think there's like a specific like place I look for communities. And in terms of best advice to attend your first meetup, if it's in person, I guess going with an open mind, it can be quite nerve-wracking, especially if you don't know anyone. When I went to the one 2 weeks ago, I only knew the host, the recruiter, Kat, and then Sam, who works on the same team with me at work. I only knew them too. So it was definitely quite nerve-wracking. So the best advice to attend your first meetup, just go for it. I think that's probably my mentality. Just throw yourself into it. Oh gosh. There is a question mentioned at the start about being a shy girl. What worked for you to overcome that? I've been thinking about this recently, like the past couple of days, like what kind of changed for me. And it's really difficult to like pinpoint what it was. I think perhaps it could have something to do with when I was in college. Well, everyone knows it's such a male-dominated industry. So maybe perhaps, I think I was one or two girls for 2 years in the class. So maybe that kind of environment was a bit of a shock to me. It was the first time kind of experienced that sort of thing. The ratio was very off. So perhaps that had something to do with it. I don't think there is anything particular. It's just kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to answer that one. I don't think there is any one thing. And then from Monica, who's in the final year of her degree, congrats. You're doing an online portfolio. Don't have any experience of doing this. Could you tell me where I can find valuable information, please? Thank you. I think there's quite a lot generally online about online portfolios. Generally, you can always use like Wix, WordPress, or Squarespace, like a website builder sort of thing. But then you can build your own. So I think with Angular, you can deploy it for free on Google Firebase, Heroku, and Netlify. I think there's tons of examples of like basic portfolios. I think the general thing to have on that is like an about section, what your portfolio is about, what you'd be kind of showing on there, and like a contact, probably minimum. And then whatever else added on top specifically for what your portfolio is about. So like for me, it was like GitHub repos and then blog posts, pulling them together. And then from Dalvinder Pal, as a developer, what would be best to do if you find it overwhelming with the numerous requirements of coding languages and tools certain jobs expect? I think the software development industry can be quite overwhelming at times. There's always new technology. It's forever changing, which is a good thing. It's a fantastic industry to be in. It's like different every day. There's challenges, and it's very competitive. It definitely can feel very overwhelming. I suggest maybe finding I can't remember the word is, finding what's the word? Finding your, not zhuzh, finding your flavor. Yeah, it's finding, yeah, yeah, specialty. Finding your specialty, what you like, really, I think. I think that would probably be a good point to start. And then Michaela, do you follow any podcasts for software and web development? I think I do follow a few, but I don't listen to them. I always try to get into podcasts. I thought I can always imagine myself like in an ideal world, sit working and listen to like a nice software development podcast, relaxing. But then typically I just have a little fan on in the background, and that's all I do really. I should really listen to those sort of podcasts, so that'd be good to do. I know recently I've been trying to listen to Steve Bartlett, I think his name is, Dragon's Den, Diary of a CEO, which is quite interesting. And a question from Josh: started writing my first blog post about my first few months in a professional role. What would be ideal to write about, do you think? Perhaps perhaps about your journey and how you got there. I think it can be the typical kind of route where people kind of struggling where to start with like a blog post. You might, depending on like what background you came from and how you maybe if you transition from a completely different career into software development, maybe even your challenges with that, and probably go from there. So how you got into where you are now, really, I suppose. I think nowadays as well, I feel like boot camps are super popular. I feel like you see more people that have gone through boot camps compared to like I'd say probably traditional now, like traditional uni. So I think that'd be a really good starting point.
Got quite a few questions in the chat as well.
Okay.
Having a scroll a few if you want me to sort of shout some out.
Okay. I like Carla. She said spice. I think specialty. I think that's appropriate. Yeah. What's the most challenging project you've worked on, from Samuel? Difficult. That's very difficult. I never really thought of that. The one that pops top of my head is DevOps analysis tool. And I think it's probably because it was my baby, and then it kind of transitioned into work, which then became very kind of work focused, and it kind of didn't feel like my baby anymore. The kind of challenging parts with it were the API aspects. So like working with the Octopus deploys APIs were really well documented, but like Bitbucket APIs were just, I feel like they're not very well documented. And then Jira was okay. I suppose it's more from the API aspect. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, really. Challenging project. Carlos asked, do you prefer web over desktop technologies? Yes. I think I've only ever really done web technologies. I think in my first role after uni, it was desktop, I believe. So probably a bit of a biased answer with that one. Alexandra asked, what is your opinion on moving to a new project which uses completely different technology? Do you think it's best to specialize the same tech stack or be open to always learning new tech and get out of your comfort zone? I'd say definitely always try to get out of your comfort zone. I think you always get some devs that like to, they know what they know and they'll keep working at it. And then you have, on the other hand, you have devs that want to kind of keep learning and expanding that knowledge into different, like dipping their toes into different pots. I guess it depends on how you work best. But I would definitely say to get out of your comfort zone and try to learn that other technology. Might even become your favorite. Just scrolling up. And what advice would you give to a developer starting their career? I would definitely say, firstly, side projects is definitely the go-to place to start side projects. And then once you've done a side project, then get a portfolio website and then display that side project or side projects onto that site. And then I think LinkedIn is probably a big part. I mean, probably not a big part, but I think it's quite nice to try to be active on LinkedIn as well with that. So with a developer starting their career, side projects, something useful, something you might even do everyday life, something that might, like a task, it might take you 5 minutes just to reduce that time, just something simple. I think that would be a great place. And then even blogging as well, like touching upon previous answer where you could start then blogging about your experience, your journey, what you've been learning so far. And then, how do you feel personal projects benefited you professionally and personally? I'd say greatly. In interviews I've been in before, I've mentioned side projects, and it's because in some role, there's probably been more than one role. As I said in one of the earlier slides, there's been a lot of heavily stagnated, basically, where I felt quite stumped in some roles where I wasn't like mentally challenged enough. So then I had to kind of put all that energy that wasn't being able to essentially get out of work into these side projects. And it definitely helped me build up my skills and then even confidence as well, because if you're, for example, this DevOps analysis tool, which I might have mentioned before, when I talked to my manager about it, and then talk to various people about it. It's also then when you talk about it, it's also confirming your knowledge about it, which is really, I think that's quite interesting. You only kind of know something once you've actually been able to relay it back to someone. You might think you know something, if that makes any sense. And then I think the final question, is, do you think webinars or in-person meetups are better for networking? I think I'm more likely to go to webinars than in-person meetups. But then it's nice to have that difference in person meetups too. You get that chance, that there's that social interaction, isn't it? And it's being different. I think nowadays it's probably more people more likely, I think, to attend webinars and meet in person. But I think in person is probably better for networking. Yes, I'd say so. I think that's all the questions. I hope I haven't missed any.
Oh, fab. Oh, I think we've just got Carlos asking one last minute question.
Do you believe in specialization or getting to know more techs at a lower level might be better? Interesting. I think probably a bit of both in a way. It's nice to have that specialization where, that's an interesting one. Probably specialization, I'd say, because at least you have that better knowledge in some tech rather than having like a bit of everything. In my opinion, it's probably better to have that better knowledge in perhaps two tech stacks compared to like a bit of knowledge in like a few of them. Yeah, I'd say specialize.
Amazing. Yeah, I think especially sort of in the development world, like you mentioned, it's so competitive. But what's really great is that, in particular, sort of working in the industry, is that you see more and more people. I see the likes of YouTube channels, I see the likes of blogs, all these different side projects. Now on a CV, if I'm ever looking at a profile, straight away, if they've got I'd say 95% of CVs now have a GitHub link on a top.
Yes.
Which is just so brilliant to see. So I think a lot of people have, in particular side projects, but no, it's great to see, especially the events, because obviously us running our tech events, because of COVID, we've changed the webinars, but before that it was sort of in-person meetups, and they give off such different vibes. Like meeting in person is so different to actually meeting somebody sort of through a screen. But it's hopefully sort of now that COVID's sort of brushed under the rug a little bit, that we might be able to get back to sort of in-person meetups. But if it wasn't for in-person, it probably wouldn't have had a chance to meet you, Lorna, because I know obviously you're down in...
Of course. So far away.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been able to do our webinar. Well, you wouldn't have been able to do this talk really if it was in person. So no, we really appreciate it. And even sort of me and Sophie will be taking away some of the points from this. I mean, actually, just today alone, one of our recruiters posted his first ever blog. So I think no matter what the industry, blogs, tech talks, everything is going to just be so helpful to sort of benefit you personally and professionally. You've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit sometimes, don't you?
Definitely. It's quite funny actually, because when I was like scripting out what I was going to say, when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I wrote down a sentence and I was like, I like to throw myself, and I put, instead of into things, I put into cars. I just thought that's not the vibe I'm going for.
No, definitely not.
No.
And that's what we like to see. But even you,
yes.
We really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Just before we sort of close off, if anybody does want to sort of take after Lorna, and you want to sort of push yourself to, if you've got a particular topic of interest, if you are working in sort of .NET or front end or whatever, and you've got a topic that you really love, and like Carson mentioned about specializing, if you're a specialist in one particular topic that you'd love to share, because the whole point of these communities is to be able to share your knowledge and benefit each other sort of personally and professionally as well. So if anybody ever wants to do one of these talks, you know, please do just drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Lucy Kay, part of the DevHub Community Manager, or my email address is lucy@ronaldjamesgroup.com. So feel free to message me. You know, we're always looking for sort of future speakers, and it can definitely push you out of your comfort zone and be sort of more known in the community. So yeah.
Yay.
I'll finish on that one. But no, thank you so much, Lorna.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.